All right, so today what I want to talk about is something that is a really important discussion to have, but often it's something that people can't quite pinpoint or they don't necessarily have the words to describe. So, I want to talk about 5 key traits that exist in a mentally healthy, thriving community. Now, it's really important to talk about this because if we're trying to build something better, if we're trying to work towards having this idea of a mentally healthy community, we actually have to have a shared picture of what that better means. Now, when we have that, it helps us to lead that direction. It helps us to communicate both within our team, but also to our community that we're trying to support. It definitely helps us to get funding, and it really helps us to stay motivated in the journey. So I really want to unpack what that looks like today. Now, as many of you would know, I talk to a lot of passionate people working in communities, and I often hear them say, I just want things to get better. I want people to feel supported and to know where to go. I want mental health and wellbeing to be taken seriously and to be considered important. But if you ask 10 different people what a wellbeing focused community look like, you'd probably get 10 different answers. So it's really important when we first come together or if we're part of a team to have a discussion around what we believe as a collective that we're working towards, because it serves a few purposes. It really unites us, it really helps us get clear on our messaging, and it helps us have a shared direction that we're leading towards. And it's often something that's forgotten. People often assume that everybody believes the same. And so it's really, something that I do quite a lot when with communities, and certainly in my community wellbeing blueprint program, is that it's one of the first things I get people to do, whether they've got a team already or whether they're just starting out, because it brings you together, it aligns your purpose, and that's really important. But what I want to do today is to give you 5 traits that I've seen over and over again in communities that are actually moving the needle and that I certainly advocate for in my Wellbeing Blueprint program. Now, these traits can really help you clarify your team's direction, spot what might be missing in your local area or your local town, and can help you communicate your vision to other people. So that's really important. Now, if you're sitting here and thinking, but I don't even have a team yet, so how's this going to be relevant to me? It's totally okay. It doesn't actually matter whether you have a team or you don't. It just means you might take a slightly different approach with it. But these traits are still really useful when you don't have a team because they give you something to aim for and something to work towards. And it's a really great starting place for the kind of conversations that you can actually begin having with just one or two other local people or passionate people that you know who might care just like you. I was talking to a lady and she felt really strongly around the solutions in her local area just missing the mark. And when I suggested to her that she have conversations with some other people, she actually immediately went, "Well, I do have someone who feels similarly to me, and also the mayor of our local town feels quite passionately." Oh my goodness! Straight away, amazing people to start having these conversations with. All right, so let's dive into these 5 key traits and what they are. First one is having a shared ownership of well-being. Now, this is no surprises that I mentioned this one, but when in mentally healthy communities or communities that are prioritising well-being, well-being isn't seen as somebody else's job. It's not seen as just responsible by the local health professionals or the local GP or the school counsellor. It's actually seen as a shared responsibility. So parents start to recognise it as something important. Teachers, sporting groups and sporting clubs, small business, youth organisations. I was just invited by the South Australian Rural Youth Ambassadors to speak with them because they had identified in as one of their priorities as being well-being, and they wanted to get more ideas around what they could do in that space. I think often there's so much excitement and interest in each of the spaces. We just need someone to ignite that fire underneath. But it's really important that in these communities, everyone sees that they have a role to play in creating a healthier, more connected community. And so um, the opportunity for impact to be created is so much more, so much greater, I should say. Okay, second key trait. Connection and belonging are seen as something that's an important aspect to improve. Now, this term is thrown around a lot, but when I say it, I really mean real opportunities for connection and not just for the sporty people or the loud personalities. And I can say that as a loud personality. I'm certainly not a sporty person. I mean, I enjoy dancing and certainly rocking it out on a music stage. But it's really important to consider that there's connection and belonging and connection opportunities for everyone. When I was teaching, I remember working with a student, and we were really concerned because he was spending huge amounts of time online. 6 hours every afternoon after school, 12 hours every day on the weekends. But what became really, really obvious is that's where he got his belonging and connection. Now, that wasn't to say that that was healthy, but what it shows is that everyone craves belonging connection, even if they don't realise it. But it can look very different for many people. So we have to create varied opportunities for people to belong. Now, it might be that we have art groups or nature walks or coffee catch-ups or shared projects or community events or barbecues or cultural groups or sporting things. It doesn't really matter. What matters is getting the voice of the people that live in the community and finding out what might be missing in order to create more of it. The other thing that's really important in these communities, or that you see in these communities, is that there's a welcoming feel, and consideration has been given to ensuring that people aren't left sitting on the sidelines, and there's ways to identify how we can support those people. All right, third trait in these communities: cross-sector collaboration. Now, there's no surprises that I'm talking about this one. I'm a really big advocate for it. But it's not just that health, education, police, community groups, sporting groups just exist in the same town and that they have incidental conversations. I think we all know, well, certainly as an educator, I did talk to these people incidentally. But in community-driven wellbeing solutions that work, there's actually intentional working together. So these people are intentionally coming together and identifying shared problems, creating shared solutions, and really learning from each other and knowing that they don't have to do it all, because they can tap into the strengths that exist across their community and across these sectors. Now, this sort of collaboration doesn't just happen magically. It takes leadership, and when I say leadership, I mean it takes a person to drive that change or to spark that opportunity. But it also takes a process. That's something that I've spent a huge amount of time, and really what is the backbones of my both my membership and my blueprint is that our sectors, our police, our health, our education, they're burnt out. They don't have the time to be coming up with how to make this collaboration happen. But when we have someone who sparks that conversation and uses a process, and that's what I've really worked to develop, is an effective way to bring people together. I think sadly, so many people have intentions, but they get so close, but they don't have just quite the right formula to make it sustainable and long lasting. And that's what I've tried to put a lot of effort into, because I really feel very passionately about the power and the impact that it creates. But it's also, when it's done well, it becomes one of the biggest markers of a thriving community. All right, key trait number 4, community-led action, not just talk. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be meetings and ideas flying around, but healthy communities turn ideas into action. You know, there's so, certainly working in education, and I guess because it was a passion of mine, I get really frustrated um, when people have this opportunity to bring people together, but they just have discussions that go round and round in circles, and people walk away not feeling a sense of progress or a feeling of action. When we do these meetings and do these gatherings in an effective way, we really help people to feel empowered, and that's really important because very often it's initially volunteers, and there's a real sense of volunteer burnout in communities. You know, society's changed, people are working more, and the people who are volunteering are often the ones who put their hands up over and over and over. So we have to value their time, and we have to make sure what we're doing leads to action. It doesn't have to be big action and it doesn't have to be perfect, but the community and the team find a way to use what they've got, to come up with ideas, to learn as they go. And as a result, there's a clear difference. You know, local people have the opportunity to really lead the charge and not wait for a solution that isn't necessarily going to fit. Instead, they create the solution, even little step by little step. But those little steps are what help people stay passionate and keep them moving forward. All right, and our last key trait is a focus on strengths, not just the gaps that exist. Now, this is really important because instead of talking about what's missing, we have to also ask what do we already have and how can we build upon that. Now, this is a real point of difference because when we actually when we actually look for what's already going on and look at the reality that's there, we are saying to the community that we value what they've already done rather than just clearing the slate and starting all over again. Now, often we come to these things, or we as the person who want to drive the change have lots of great ideas, and I'm not saying ignore that. Come to these meetings, and like I said, there's a real process around these initial meetings. Come to those things, you talk about those ideas, celebrate them so everybody and you feel valued. Just put them sitting somewhere just for a very small time, and then look at the reality. What's currently happening? Is there something that's happening, but there's a sticking point where something's not quite working that we could use our ideas to tweak? Or is there something that we can see that can be built upon? Okay, we can still bring in new ideas, but looking at the strengths that are already there, the local solutions, the underused venues, the people that are already in the community and what they can do, the existing events that can be leveraged, and as I mentioned, those sticking points where current ideas are perhaps getting stuck, and rather than reinventing the wheel all over again, we can just find that sticking point and fix it and move forward. This mindset shift changes everything because it helps your community become more resilient, more creative, and your solutions become more sustainable, and it's really important. All right, so we've heard our 5 key traits. How can we use this within our towns? Now, if you've already got a team or even just a few interested locals, this list can be a great starting point for reflection. So you might ask, which of these traits do we already have? Which ones might be missing? Which one do we want to focus on first? Just having these conversations helps get everybody on the same page, and it helps all these other people feel like they're part of something meaningful. Now, you could even create a visual snapshot with your team. Perhaps, like I do this as part of the really the foundational stage of my blueprint. Is one of the first things that we do is we create a snapshot of what we're imagining. or what we all believe a mentally healthy community looks like, both individually and with as a as a team or as a group of passionate people, because it really starts to give you that shared vision. And hot tip, share it with share it through social media, because it starts getting your community to notice what you're talking about. And this is what in my community turned into $25,000 worth of funding. It was just incredible. But these simple things can be really, really effective. Now, you can even create, rate where you feel your community sits with each of these 5 traits, or just create, like I said, create a snapshot. But it's a really good way to get unstuck and to figure out where you might go next. And even if you've got an established team and you're further down the track, it's a great activity to come back to, just to re-clarify where you're sitting and reignite the passion. Now, if you don't have a team yet, don't let that stop you. This is where you can begin. Pick one trait that really resonates with you and ask, who else do I know who might care about this? Just start with one conversation, one coffee, one shared frustration or idea. Because trust me, from little things, big things grow. I absolutely can promise you. It's often the place that it all starts to happen. All right, so I'd just love to give you a quick action that you can take right now before we say farewell. This is really important. When listening to something is great, but when you take that trait and do something with it, it changes things. It's really profound. So all I want you to do, very simple action. Think about the 5 traits you heard, or just think about what you heard today, and think about one thing that stood out to you. One thing. Was it the belonging connection? Was it the shared vision? Was it the cross-sector collaboration? Whatever it might have been. And consider which one do you think your town is already strong in? Is there one that you're strong in? Or do you think is there one that you feel you need more of? And I just want you to drop that in the comment. Just one thing. It might be, our town's great at this. We need to improve on this. I really liked the sound of this one. It seems so simple, but that simple action will help you move forward more than you realise. All right, I'm going to stop talking now, because I can talk for a long time. Thanks as always for showing up today, whether you're joining me live or you're watching this as a replay. These conversations really matter, and you matter in the conversations. I just want us to keep imagining, keep building, and really see what's possible. And as always, let's stop watching the mental health statistics and let's start changing them. I'll talk soon.